Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Yes, hello again and welcome to episode 135 of Imagine Theatre's podcast series, and this time it's the latest in our occasional series looking at the stock pantomime characters and the turn of the comic.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
Now, in the last episode, I was joined by the multi-talented singer, actor, magician and Sooty's right-hand man, Richard Cadell. If you missed it, you can still check it out along with all of the other previous episodes, and don't forget to subscribe to the series so that you don't miss out in the future. So again, in this episode, for the latest in our occasional series looking at the stock pantomime characters, we're concentrating on the comic. And joining me are two seasoned comics with decades of experience, north and south of the border, resident comic at the Pavilion Theatre in Glasgow, Liam Dolan.
Hello.
And the man who's played most of the biggest pantos across the country, Joe Pasquale.
Hi Martin, hi Liam, how are you both right?
Really good, thank you. I'm going to start with you, Liam. First of all, I'm not really quite sure how much you both know about the history of the pantomime comic, going back to Commedia dell'arte, and also one man in particular, Liam, Joseph Grimaldi.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I've had a little look on, like, I mean, you just become, you go down a rabbit hole with it. But, you know, going back to the old school variety and dated way back in the times when the comic would come on and just everybody would relax and everybody would be in a safe pair of hands. And I think people like Joseph Grimaldi are just like paved the way for everybody, like we all continue to do.
Yeah, Joe, did you know that, I mean, obviously today the comic is often referred to as the Joey. Did you know much about Grimaldi?
Yeah, I did. There's also that story. I don't know if it's true or not, whether it's him or whether there was another clown in those days that a bloke went to the doctor because he was so depressed. You must know the story. I can't remember if it was Joe Grimaldi. There were two clowns. And he just went to the doctor and said, I'm so depressed, what can you do for me? He said, if you want to go be happy, go and see the funniest man in town. Go see the clown Joe Grimaldi. And he went, yeah, but doctor, I am Grimaldi. That's the old story that goes about.
That is a true story.
But yeah, I was aware of that, and Joey in the top banana and all that sort of stuff. All this stuff that is passed down over the years, and all these little phrases about breaking a leg. You know, there's so many phrases where that comes from, and why you mustn't whistle in a theatre. All these little things that you pick up over the years. You think, why shouldn't you whistle in a theatre? And that came from the days in the 19th century when a lot of sailors were put into port and they didn't have any work when they weren't out at sea, so they'd get local jobs at the theatre. And what would happen is if you whistled on a ship, it meant that I was going to bring the sail in, and so you had to duck. So they used to whistle. They didn't have comms in the theatre in those days. They'd whistle or bring a cloth in. If you didn't know it was coming, then they'd just bring it down and hit you on the head, which is why you mustn't whistle, because people think they bring the cloth in. Well, it's all that sort of stuff that comes from those early days of panto and theatre.
Yeah, and Liam, the other thing about Grimaldi was that he was the first really to wear outrageous makeup and costumes, really loud and colourful. He invented quite a few catchphrases. He used to say things like, here we go again, and shall I? He'd ask the audience, shall I? Which is still something that we do with panto audiences today. And the knockabout or slapstick humour. In fact, he was the one who had the slapstick, Liam. So really, he's the father of panto in many ways, isn't he?
Well, absolutely. And as Joe said, somebody who's kind of paved the way for everybody. And the thing is, you pass on these things that you've learnt through the years of doing panto and working in theatre, like Joe was saying about the whistling and all these things. But you never know. I couldn't tell you who told me those things. It's just something that you pick up and you learn, and then you pass on. Because even working in the last season in the Pavilion in Glasgow, and there's younger dancers, and they're whistling about it, and you say, well, don't whistle, and they tell you, oh, why do? And you tell them the reason, but you don't know where it came from. But people that kind of paved the way, and people like that, kind of with the outrageous costumes and the slapstick and things like that, are the pioneers, and the reason we're still lucky enough to do panto today, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you were right at the beginning when you said with any of this, you can go down a rabbit hole because it leads you in so many different directions. And there's no doubt that Grimaldi also influenced people like Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and, you know, even later on, people like Norman Wisdom with that knockabout humour. So, Joe, in terms of panto comics, whether it's influenced your own act or whether it's just influenced you as a panto comic, Who did you look up to as a kid?
As a kid, I had so many idols I looked up to. Obviously, there was the obvious ones like Tommy Cooper. Dickie Henderson was a big one for me. I loved Dickie Henderson, and I was really lucky because I started in the 80s, and I had three mentors, which were giants of genius as well. One was Ken Dodd, another one was Des O'Connor, and the other one was Bob Monkhouse. And all three of those were kings of panto in their day. So I grew up watching them, and then I got the chance to work with them and be mentored by them as well. And my first panto was with another giant of panto who was Rod Hull-and-Emu. And I learned more from Rod in panto than anyone else. And his take on it was as panto comic. And I would watch him in the wings. I did 2 years with him. And I watched him in the wing every night for 2 years. And it wasn't anything that he said to me. It was everything I felt off of him when he was doing it. And his phrase was, he said, being a panto comic. So I was right at the bottom of the bill. Nobody knew, no, it wasn't, my name wasn't even on the poster, some of them. And he said to me, a panto comic, his job is to create mayhem, and it's also to control it. You have to know when to pull it back. You have to create a complete mayhem. And I witnessed him every night. His entrance was the best entrance I ever saw in a panto. And he would come from the back of the stalls. A lot of people do that. But because he had Emu with him, he'd come down the middle of the aisle and he would grab whatever anybody had, ice cream, sweets, it would go everywhere, popcorn, he would throw it everywhere. And because he had this third party, he had the Emu, it wasn't him doing it. He could get away with murder. It was amazing to watch him create this mayhem. And he'd get rid of everybody's sweets, whatever, made for sharing, he'd throw it all out. And then right at the front, he would nick someone's coat from the front that was over the back of their chair, whatever it was. And so the whole audience could see him pick up this coat. It wasn't him, obviously it was the Emu, pick up the coat, and they'd take it on stage and he'd drag it about, trying to get the coat off the Emu. And eventually the Emu would throw it off in the wings. That was it, forgotten about until the next scene. And throughout the whole show, every single person throughout that whole show wore that coat in some scene, right? The coat, and don't ask me why, but the coat used to bring the house down every time it made an entrance. Whoever had it on, didn't matter, but it wasn't referenced. No one would go, look at my coat. They would just wear it. Some of the ensemble just wear it, doing a dance routine. The fairy would come on as well, come with it, whatever it was. And this coat, and it made me realize that it's not the material, that it's more than the material. It's the whole genre of mayhem. But once again, it has to be controlled. It has to be in a bubble. Otherwise, the whole show becomes a mess. And this is why it's important. A lot of people don't realize. They'd see the comic ad-libbing and mucking about. Think, I can do that, and they can't. If everybody does it, the whole thing goes to a mess, and you can't do that.
I think that's a perfect example of a running gag as well. And it takes us back really to Commedia dell'arte again, because that was one of the things that Grimaldi and others developed, that sort of anarchy on stage. The servants, by the way, in Commedia dell'arte, if you didn't know, were called Zanni, Zanni. And that's where the term zany comes from today, which is another sort of influence from those early days. Liam, what about you? Who might have influenced you as a comic in panto?
It's funny actually talking about Rod Hull-and-Emu, because the first time I was ever on stage at the Pavilion Theatre in Glasgow when I was a kid, I was thrown over Rod Hull's shoulder and attacked by Emu, which is a huge claim to fame. I was absolutely delighted to be on that stage with him. But I think people like Rod Hull are a great example, but mine has got to be the Crankies. Jeanette Cranky is just... For me, growing up, I absolutely idolised them and watched them on the TV all the time, and then was lucky enough to see them in different shows. And just watching that masterclass of, as you say, anarchy and zany and it all going wrong, but so cleverly. Les Dawson plays the piano badly because he plays it so good, and it's things like that. And when you go and see Jeanette, who I'd seen so many times in so many years, she was my example of, that's what I want to do, because it looked like she was enjoying it. It looked like she had everybody else enjoying it. And just that everything was going wrong and it was all falling apart, and it was all so cleverly constructed, which was a masterclass in itself.
And that was slightly different, of course, in that she was part of a double act rather than a standalone comedian. So that was a different dynamic in a way, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But what I felt was that we got the experience of both of them, because Ian would lead you into that sense of belief that he was annoyed with Jimmy and he was fed up with Jimmy. And so you were laughing at how much this naughty schoolboy character, whether it was Jimmy as the schoolboy, or whether it was Jeanette as Buttons or any other character, you still bought into that double act, and the believability of it all going wrong, and it was down to the strength of both of them, I think.
Now, again, this is really interesting that you should mention the Crankies, and Jimmy Cranky in particular, because what Grimaldi did was very often likened to a naughty boy in a man's body. He would imprison policemen, he would trip up old women, construct mock vehicles from cheeses and odd bits of furniture and so on, and steal trays of tarts and consume gigantic quantities of sausages. So again, there is a link there to the modern day comic. Now, Joe, what about, back in the day at the Palladium, for instance, you had the comic playing the leading character. Instead of having a principal boy, for instance, Norman Wisdom played Aladdin. Robinson Crusoe, played by Ken Dodd. Have you ever done that?
No, I've never done it except for this year. This is the first year I'm doing that, in actual fact. I'm actually doing Baron Up this year. I've never done it. I would play principal comic, and that was a conscious decision. I have to say one more thing, going back to what Liam said about the Crankies. So I worked with the Crankies many, many times, never in panto, but in cabaret and in theatre. And what was great about as he just said, was for them as well, their act, their live act, their theatre act and their cabaret act simply dovetailed into panto. It was made for panto. They didn't change anything. They did exactly the same stuff, maybe a little bit stronger gags in cabaret, but that nothing changed. They simply just, it was like taking it out of that suit there, put a costume on and do that same stuff. And it worked brilliantly with adults and with kids alike, which is something that a comic has to remember, is you have to play to every age group out there. Which going back to what I've just said, then is going to be hard for me this year to not play. I'm still going to play principal comic, but I'm not doing it as the principal role of I'm doing it as a principal role. Well, I don't think he's principal role. I'm 65 years old this year, and I can't go hard up going, oh, well, and Button's been 65. Taking the decision this year, I'm writing it this year as well, which is going to be a real a difficult transition for me, because you don't have that same the same banter with the audience that you do as the Buttons character. So Button, we're still going to have a Buttons, but it's going to be played by a comic as such. We're having it more as an actor this year, which is going to be a weird thing. But yeah, I've never done it before, so yeah, it's going to be interesting. And the other thing that I used to enjoy as well when I was younger was a principal boy being a girl. I quite liked that dynamic, which obviously they don't do quite so much anymore.
No, and I think it's part of the evolution, isn't it? It doesn't matter if a woman is the dame or the comic is the lead principal character, like Aladdin, as long as the general feeling of panto and many of the other constituent parts are there, it doesn't really matter, does it? Liam, what about you? What do you think about the comic actually being the lead, playing Jack in Jack and the Beanstalk, or playing Aladdin in Aladdin?
Do you know, I did it once in St Albans. I was Jack in Jack and the Beanstalk, and we didn't have a Simple Simon or a brother. So they basically created this role for me to be the principal boy, but also to be the comic. So Jack was getting a lot of stuff with the baddie, and there was a lot of things that maybe he wouldn't normally do if he had a sidekick or had a brother. So that was a very interesting, because I got to play the lead principal boy and the comic combined. And I really enjoyed it, but I much prefer when there's a separation. In saying that, when I did Tunbridge Wells and I was Aladdin, and Tucker, who is a brilliant comic, was playing Wishy Washy, and I just kept watching him and again learning and kind of thinking, I wish I was the principal comic rather than being the lead role, you know.
Panto is one of those areas, variety is in general, and you both intimated at it already, Joe, isn't it? That wherever you are, whoever's on the bill, whether it's panto or cabaret, whatever, you watch and learn, don't you?
Oh my God, this is the art of it. This is the business. I reckon to become an expert at anything takes 10,000 hours. And I don't know how many hours I've been on stage in 40 years, but you never stop learning. And the other thing is as well, I always find you only learn when it doesn't go well. All the time you think it's going well, you think, oh, this is great. And you get a little bit too big for your boots and your ego kicks in and you think you're the cat's whiskers. And it's not. It's when things go wrong, that's when you learn most of all. And that's when you learn humility as well, that you never, ever, ever stop learning. And you see someone good, however old they may be, come straight into the business, maybe doing it 40 years. If they're good, and you watch them and you can learn from that still.
Liam, what are the key constituents, if you like, or the characteristics of a good comic or clown?
I think the key elements are they have to have, as Joe said, that rapport with the audience. It's layered like an onion. There's levels of it for the kids and for the adults. I think the thing that I love about it is that on certain comic roles that I've done, you could take my character and me out of the show and you would still get the story, you would still get the full thing, because I'm just there to cause the mayhem and the zaniness and the madcap and, you know, the classic panto routines, but the actual through story continues. And I think that's kind of important as well, to know what you're there for and know what the audience expect. Sometimes you can see an audience sit back and think, right, okay, here we go. We're going to sit and enjoy this routine because it's a traditional panto routine, or here's the comic on, and it's going to be something different, or it's going to be something funny. But I think the key characteristics are that kind of knowing the levels of the audience and knowing what you're there for and providing everything that they expect from the comic.
Yeah, I guess as well as the loud costumes maybe. And Joe, what about that rapport with other characters? Because it varies, doesn't it, depending on which panto? Because you may have a bit of pathos with Cinderella if you're playing Buttons. You may have a lot of sort of to and fro with an audience in whichever panto. And then, of course, there's that relationship with the dame as well. So they're all key parts as well, aren't they?
Yeah, I have to go back slightly on something just to follow up on what Liam just said as well. Then I think one of the key constituents and parts of being a principal comic is the ability to adapt to every audience, right? Because I've seen some comics that they'll say to me, "Oh, the stuff in the morning, I hate the morning shows where all these kids, when you've got 10 schools in, you've got 700 7-year-olds in. I much prefer the evening because the gags don't work with the kids in the morning. The material you've got to those audiences, because the ones you do, if you do the kids in the morning, they're like a lot of fart willy belly button jokes. In the evening, they want slightly more complex material, and you have to be able to adapt to do that. And some people in the early days doing panto have only got the material that's been written for them, or they don't have the ability to ad lib or to slow down maybe because their old audience, they're not picking up what you're saying. Because that's the other thing is you forget, you're doing it 50, 60, 70 times. The audience hear it once. And so many times I've seen people on stage going, you're gabbling it. You know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. I've heard you say it for 40 days. This audience only heard it for the first time, and you're going so fast, they're not picking it up. That's why they're not laughing. And you have to break it down, and you can only learn that through experience over the years of doing so many shows, and so many times where it goes well, and so many times it doesn't go well. You go, why hasn't it gone well? That hasn't gone well because I was working too fast, because it's not the same audience that I had this morning. And you work that, and you look at it every day, and you break it down. Which is the same applies to when you get a new cast come in. There might be somebody that's come from a soap that has never done panto before, and they can't ad lib. So you have to, once again, you have to adapt to them. Go, if they can't ad lib, you can't ad lib with them, because they're going to stand there and go, that's not my line. You have to have that ability to know, to read the room of the audience and read the room on stage. If they can't deal with you, don't give it to them. Save for the people that can deal with that.
It's another important point you make there, isn't it, about those morning shows or school shows where the audience is made up predominantly of children, because they are the audience and very often the performers of the future.
It's important that kids come and see panto. It's their first experience of live theatre, especially this day and age. Kids are so involved with mobile phones and iPads and God knows what else, a screen in front of them. And they don't go outside as much, they don't play as much, they don't express themselves the same way that I used to as a kid. And so to have a kid go to a theatre at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old for the first time and be able to express themselves, be able to shout at a performer and have the performer shout back at them and interact with them on the same level and be involved in the show, regardless of how much you rehearse a panto, it doesn't work till you get the next member of the audience, the next member of the cast. And the audience is the member of that cast, because they join in. They're involved as much as we are. And it's a tennis match. You give it to them, they give it back to you. The energy is transferred from them back to us, back to them, back to us. You can never let the ball drop. And if you can get a kid to enjoy that experience for the first time at a young age, then that's a theatre goer all their life. And it gets them be able to express them. Sometimes it annoys me a little bit that sometimes you get school shows in, and sometimes you get, you might have 1,000 kids in, all under 7. And you can see the teachers at the end of each row, and sometimes they'd say to the kids, shh, keep quiet. And you go, no, don't tell them to keep quiet. Let them shout. Let them be part of it. They're as integral to this as I am. So let them express themselves. And it annoys me when some teachers get them to keep quiet. And no, let them be who they are. And that's what's important about a panto to me. Also, on another level, it's great that that it's a family thing. You know, every generation comes to it. You know, they get a whole family. Sometimes it's the only time they get together for, that they experience that every year. Sometimes they go on the same show, same day every year. And if you can bring that family together just through that couple of hours, and this is really important, is it gives everybody, including me, including their cast, it gives everybody freedom of concern. For those 2 hours that show is on, you are completely immersed in doing it. It's like riding a motorbike, it's like flying a plane. The only thing you can think about when you're doing that show is that show. The only thing that you want the audience to think about when they're watching that show is that show, because everybody is full of concerns about everything in life. We're bombarded every day of our life now by newspapers, the internet, and everything, of all the stuff that's going on in the world. And if you can give freedom of concern, then we've done our job, and that's why I go back to it every year.
Just going back to the relationship with other characters, you know, whether it be Cinderella in Cinderella or whether it be any dame, that's a really key part as well, Joe, isn't it? And that's something you may never have worked together before, so you've got to get that right in the rehearsal room.
Absolutely, and because there's such, as you said, a diverse way of working, everybody works completely differently now, and a relationship between, depending on who the dames are. Like this year, I'm doing Cinderella, so we've got two ugly sisters, which would be a different dynamic to work in with Mother Goose, who would be my mum, for example. So once again, you have to look in reality as well. What is the reality of this relationship? If this is my mum, then I will talk to her like I used to talk to my mum in real life. And if this is my sister that I didn't like when I was a kid, I'll talk to her the way I didn't like my sister as a kid. And you put some reality into it, and it's like walking to a room and telling the truth. The same as any acting. If you're doing a play, you know, the basic I learned very early on. Acting is about walking to a room, planting your feet and telling the truth. And it's the same in panto. It's no different, other than the performance is heightened, but the truth and the reality is still there of the character that you're talking to.
Liam, talk to me about the sort of pathos. If you're playing Buttons, you've got to have that crush on Cinderella, which is an integral part of the story, which isn't really the case in many other pantos, is it? How does that work for you?
Yeah, that's one of the things that are very, very different when you're playing the character, because in Buttons you become, and I think you become part of the story, a huge part of the story, because you love Cinderella so much. And you know, there's the huge part of when she tells Buttons that she's fallen in love and he thinks it's with him, and it's such a sad part, and the audience, by the time this part comes, the audience are so like on Buttons' side that they are just, they're absolutely heartbroken for him. But I really love that character of Buttons, because it is that part of the story, whereas the other ones, you are with your Simple Simon, you're in the house. But I also love what you were saying about the different characters and working with them. I personally love writing a comic and baddie scene, because I love that relationship of the good and the bad, not just necessarily with the fairy or the good bad or the bad person. I love the comic and a baddie, because you can really go to town on that, and you can get the false corpses in, you can do the laughs, you can wind them up a bit, you can change something, and the audience absolutely love that, I think, because they want them to feel as well, because they're the bad guy or the bad girl, you know.
What is the best sort of relationship, Joe, that you've had in a panto? I'm reminded of seeing you at the Birmingham Hippodrome in Peter Pan, Smee playing opposite Leslie Grantham as Captain Hook, and I couldn't believe the relationship, the rapport that the two of you had, which had both of you in stitches as well as the audience.
Yeah, I did. In fairness, on that production there, I worked with Leslie for 9 years on the trot, though, so we built up that relationship for many, many years, and that's it's a case of trusting each other. That and Leslie was great at letting me ad lib as well. He was he'd go, knock your pipe out, do whatever you want, and he was fantastic like that with me. And I did Peter Pan with loads of other Captain Hooks as well. John Chalice. I did one a couple of years ago with Judge Rinder, who was fantastic as Captain Hook as well. But to be honest, I love doing Mr. Smee, because you can play that as a younger bloke, as an old, any age you like, and you could do anything. And also, I don't have to have a shave. That's a big thing for me, because I don't like shaving at the best of times. But for Mr. Smee, you could grow a beard for that. I loved it. But yeah, it is a wonderful thing when you can build up a relationship with somebody on stage. Sometimes it happens on the first time you work with them as well. You click with them. I've been very lucky over the years. I worked with some great Captain Hooks. Marty Pello was a great one as well. I loved Marty. He was so scary. You know, a lot of them were quite comical. John Chalice was a comical one. Judge Rinder was a comical one. But yeah, Leslie was just Dirty Den from EastEnders. He played it as Dirty Den, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, you often get that, don't you? Those sort of baddies from the soaps play baddies in panto. It seems to work well, doesn't it?
Yes, it does indeed. And I said, and he was a great actor as well. You know, he never broke character. That was the thing with him. He might, you know, he never really broke down. He never corpsed. He might have a wry smile every now and then, but he never let himself go. He was a proper actor.
Liam, what about you? Have you built any sort of relationships up long term with dames or other people on stage?
Yeah, I work with a dame, a guy called Craig Glover, who has been in Glasgow for several years now. Craig and I were actually in the youth theatre together in Scotland, and he came to audition, funnily enough, for the Baron. And I said, it's not the right time for you. And then I put him into Cinderella as one of the uglies. But the thing is, because we know each other so well, like Joe was just saying about working with Leslie Grantham for 9 years, you build that rapport and you build that trust. Because if you're on stage and you go off on a little tangent, you know that the safety net's there for them to come back to. You know that they're not going to. And I've worked with a couple of people who it just didn't work as well as what it does now, and that's one of the joys of working with somebody that you can trust. You know, if something happens in the audience, you're going to ad-lib. You're not going to throw them completely by going off script. You're not going to put them in the spot or make them feel uncomfortable. You just know that, and it works both ways. If Craig was to go and do something, which he has done, I'm there ready for him to, and I know when he's coming back to me, and vice versa, because I think it's really important that you have that rapport with people that you're working with, because there is that safety blanket and safety net, not just for the performers, but also for the audience as well.
There's no doubt, Liam, isn't there, that lots of things are changing. Panto continues to evolve, new technology and all sorts of other things, but there'll never be a panto without a central comic, will there?
I hope not, because I think it's like really important to have that, because you are that kind of comic, and also you're keeping with tradition. And you know, it's a shame, because sometimes you get people who are actors playing the comic and they're just going, you know, with what's written down on the script because they're from a soap or they're from somewhere else. And I think it's important to have somebody who is a comic playing the comic, who is variety, who is a comedian, who is impressionist or something like that, that they can actually just, they've got an act, they've got something that they can bring to the table, as well as bringing the words and bringing the costumes and things. I think it's important to have, because you don't always, as we very well know, you don't see it as often as we used to.
I tell you what, if you do love panto comics, you can get 4 for the price of 1 again this autumn, because the Pratt Pack are back on tour. I'm talking about Shane Ritchie, Bradley Walsh, Brian Conley and Joe Pasquale. And this is just a labour of love for you, Joe, isn't it? It's not hard work, is it?
No, it's not. No, it's no work at all. The only work is trying to stay on a diet, because they eat so much rubbish. That's the hardest thing about it, because the van is filled up with so much sweets, cakes, crisps and fizzy pop, and it's terrible. I put on a stone last time in a month. It was terrible. But the show itself is just a joy. We share the same dressing room. We turn up at the venue 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we sit in there, get a load of rubbish food in, and we just take the mick out of each other for a few hours. And then when it's showtime, we take the atmosphere we built in that room and just put it on stage. And it's just a joy. And we're all in our 60s now, so there's no egos involved. No one is saying, "Oh, look what he's doing. He's getting laughs there. Why can't I get laughs like that? I wish I could do this. I wish I could do this. Why is he doing that?" None of that at all. It's like, go on, knock your pipe out, son. Get us, man. And we all encourage each other. And the main criteria of the show, really, Martin, is to make each other laugh, and the audience go along with that. And it's wonderful to work in front of a big 15-piece band. That's what's a real joy. And I'm the only one. I sing, but I'm not a singer. The other 3 can really sing, and I don't. I do sing in the show, but I'm not a singer. So it's great for me to all of a sudden have this big 15-piece band whacking out behind me, and it's a joy. It really is.
Well, the tickets are available now. That's one worth catching up with in the autumn ahead of the panto season. And of course, you mentioned, Joe, that you're playing Baron Hardup this year. Liam, what about you? What's your panto this year?
We're doing Goldilocks and the 3 Bonnie Bears, because it's in Scotland. So we're doing that. But I have to say that show you were just talking about with the Pratt Pack, I went to see it in Glasgow, and I absolutely loved every second of it. I love every person that's in it. I've learned and watched them all for years, and it's an incredible show, and I'll definitely be going back. I loved it.
And your panto this year, Joe, where are you?
Dartford this year, obviously doing Cinderella, so it's going to be a real joy. I'm writing and directing this year, so that'd be great. I like doing the whole lot, because then you have complete control over it, and then it's a funny show. I like to write it funny. I like to direct it in a funny way. Everybody can be humorous, but not everybody's been wacky and zany, as Liam said earlier. You have to keep it in reality. The love is there. The love has to be there for the characters to make the contrast. I always think that the strength of a good panto, comes from the baddie. If you've got a really good baddie, you've got a good show. If you've got a baddie that's a bit wishy-washy, excuse the pun, if you've got a baddie that doesn't really cut it, then there's nothing to play against. There's no dynamic. You need a baddie that the audience, and then the goodies become, it doesn't matter, the goodies are good and that's the end of it. But if you've got a weak baddie, you've got a weak show. I always think the baddie is everything.
Well, listen, it's been fascinating talking to you both. Thank you so much for talking to us. Liam and Joe, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Martin. Cheers, Liam.
And that's it for now. Don't forget to subscribe through your favourite podcast app. Spread the word to anybody you know who loves pantomime. And next time, I'll be chatting to the actor, director, writer, educator and resident pantomime dame in Swindon, David Ashley. So join me, Martin Ballard, next time for episode 136 of Just Imagine.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.